election integrity and how I kind of started on this path. As Catherine was telling you, I was working with the American Bar Association. They had a program called SEALY. We were working in countries from the former Soviet Union, going over there, helping them to set up laws. They didn't even have laws for something as simple as a prenuptial agreement. So we would help them write those laws. I do a lot of research. And through the ABA, I was able to go over to Macedonia. And it was wonderful to go over there, especially after seeing a country that had come out of the struggles of war and how they were so excited. And all they wanted was a free and fair election. And that's what we were there to ensure. Coming back to DC, it was an unpaid internship. So there I am, Northwest DC, as you know, it's beautiful, wonderful. And I'm going home, living in Southeast DC. And as many of you know, you go a certain amount of blocks down Pennsylvania Avenue, and it's a whole different world. So while I was focusing on international affairs, I thought, why don't I do something about this? Why aren't we cleaning up our own backyard? I saw so much poverty and struggle, and I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and take the bus, and you have to worry about getting robbed at the bus stop. And so seeing those two parts of DC, I had never seen that before. I came up here in high school, and they only keep you in Northwest, and they keep a very tight control over those students. You never get to see the other part of DC. So you would think it is just that part where the National Mall is and the Capitol, and there's not this type of rampant poverty in the DC area. So that's when I decided I wanted to do something. I went back to Alabama, that's where I'm from, and I started looking around trying to figure out what I could do to maybe work on my own backyard. And that's when I found out about Acorn. They were trying to organize in Alabama, and if you know anything about Acorn, their tactics don't fly well in the South. Last time they were in Virginia, they did a protest where they tried to rush in and intimidate people, and they locked them all up in jail, and the Acorn National wouldn't let them out. That was the last time they had an office in Virginia. So they tried this in Birmingham a few years back, maybe in the 90s, and it didn't work. So in 2002, they thought they were going to come back to Alabama. So I was working with a guy named Pat McCoy. He was telling me about, Acorn helps people. We're hands-on in the community. We're out there, all the chapters are working together to create power. And I do the power with the quotation marks because I'm going to explain that later. So I turned him down because I didn't want to work in Alabama. I wanted to go back to DC. So in 2005, I found a job working with Acorn Political Operations and its sister organization, Project Vote. I don't know if many of you remember Project Vote. It's the organization that Obama worked with in the 90s. They were in the same office. When I got there, they told me, oh, you're working with Acorn. So all I had heard was Acorn, 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 Acorn. When I got there, they told me about Project Vote. And the reason why that's significant is that Project Vote is a separate organization, technically. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, which means it's tax exempt. It's not supposed to engage in partisan political activity. What I found out is not only was I working for Acorn, but at the same time I was working for Project Vote on partisan activities and getting paid out of the nonprofit account. I didn't understand all of this at first because I was a newbie. I took classes here in DC at the Foundation Center, and I began to learn how a nonprofit works. And along the way, I was given several troubling assignments. The first one was to research the voter fraud allegations of 2004. I don't know if you guys remember how contentious that election really was for the Democrats, but they had such hatred for Bush that George Soros had put millions of dollars behind this election because he wanted Kerry to win. They started these organizations called America Coming Together, or ACT. There was another one called America Votes. All of those were funded out of the Open Society Institute, Democracy Alliance, and included Acorn, Project Vote, SEIU, Emily's List, Planned Parenthood, and a host of other liberal organizations. What they did in 2004 was massive voter registration fraud on a scale that had not been seen since the 60s. And that's in Chicago. I think you guys know what I'm talking about there. But it was amazing. So I had to sit there and try to research all of these allegations in 2005 and come up with a defense. And the more I researched it, the more I found out, yes, these people were guilty of sin. And yes, no matter what state they were in, they all seemed to do the same thing. It was almost like they were trained that way. But Acorn, discarding all the research I did, had me write up that in each case, it was one lone employee, or in the case of Missouri, 9 lone employees that got together and decided to defraud Acorn and turn in these fraudulent registrations, and it wasn't their fault. They threw these employees under the bus and they kept it moving. That's exactly what they did every single time. No one ever paid attention to the fact that it seemed to be systemic, and it was almost as they were creating a culture of fraud. So the employees were prosecuted. Acorn would go on to run another voter registration drive. The more you stay at Acorn, they tell you if you stay past a year, you get a gold watch because the attrition rate was so high. And the more you stay there, the more they trust you. So in 2006, I was given more responsibilities. I helped write the political plans for Colorado and Maryland, and help with Ohio and work with the state directors across the country. I also started handling the money. And the more you handled the money, the more you got to see how things were working. All the grant checks that were coming in from organizations like Wellspring and the Tides Foundation and the Sandler Family Foundation out of California, they were coming in under Project Vote, tax-exempt money, and they've been funneled into Acorn for partisan political activity. How many of you guys remember Albert Wynn? Albert Wynn here in Maryland. Acorn personally put a hit out on him. I helped them come up with these PowerPoints and these slides that they used as door knockers, and they went out and they put them in the black communities, and there was pictures of Wynn hugging Bush or shaking Bush's hand, and it was that they were using the toxicness of Bush to go after Wynn. Using me, over here getting paid tax-exempt funds to do this partisan political activity. They destroyed Wynn and they put in Donna Edwards. Edwards was head of the ARCA Foundation, one of Project Vote's big donors, and she was also part of that coalition that was funneling this money between the organizations. All of this power that they were trying to create was political power. It was never about helping people. All they wanted to do was to get their people elected. And they weren't just looking big. It wasn't just the national offices. They were doing everything from county dog catcher to school board to assembly and anything that they could to get their people in place. Because once you got them in place, it was easy to get them to run for office. And the next thing you know, you've got a congresswoman like Sheila Jackson Lee, who has no idea what she's talking about, seems to be kind of functionally illiterate, but there she is, representing, a state. Can you imagine some of these people that have been able to slip through the cracks? It's because they were Acorn people, and they were delivering those votes for them. Antonio Villarosa, I hope I'm saying that right, he's the mayor of Los Angeles. He used to be the assemblyman of Los Angeles. He couldn't get the black vote until he partnered with Acorn. He lost the first time he ran for mayor. The second time he ran for mayor, he got over 45% of the black vote. He's Acorn's man in office. He wanted to run for governor, but Jerry Brown beat him to it. But imagine, in a couple of years, there could be Governor Villarosa, an Acorn man, and the next thing you know, he's in national office. So this is how it works. It's all about power. It's all about a system of people that have so much to lose that they're not going to rat each other out. It's a tightly held network, and it goes all the way to the top. And that's what I learned in 2007. In 2007, we were working on the campaign, and as far back as 2006, there were Acorn documents that state Obama in 2008. We already knew in 2006 that Obama was going to get it. I always call Hillary the red herring because it made it look like it was actually fair, but they wanted him to come from behind and have it push. And some of you may remember, in the black community, they were saying Obama wasn't black enough. They didn't like him. They had to go out there and do this big PR push and make it about race. All of a sudden, you saw Obama hanging out with the rappers, and he was on the black morning shows, and we're talking about race more and more. And they did that because they needed to get the black people invested in their person. They called it a once-in-a-generation opportunity to get Obama elected. And that's because they were pushing for ideas like universal health care, the Employee Free Choice Act, cap and trade. If you go and you Google Acorn's People's Platform, that's exactly, it mirrors exactly Obama's agenda. That's what they were trying to pass. So in November of 2007, I attended a meeting in Arkansas. And Zach Paulette, who was the executive director of Acorn, he gets up and he says, you know what? I supervised Obama in the 90s, and Acorn produces leaders. And as a liberal, I'm sitting there and I'm all excited because what he's saying is, you too, a community organizer, can be the next president of the United States. And I believe that. So I went back to DC, and I'm sitting at my desk on the, right there on the Capitol Hill office, and the phone rings. And it's the Obama campaign. And they asked me, is this the Project Vote that Obama worked for in the 90s? Now the reason why they asked is because there's also a Project Vote Smart. And sometimes we get their mail and we get their phone calls. But once I confirmed that it was indeed the Project Vote they were looking for, I got excited and I started typing an email to my superiors, letting them know that the Obama campaign had contacted Project Vote and why. They wanted to talk about some of the questions that were coming out about his history as a community organizer. No one said anything to me for a few days, and then my supervisor calls me into the office. She gives